the Thursday edition of 2020, and an opportunity for you to engage in a conversation we're going to be launching. And over this next hour, a wonderful opportunity. You might have a question, and there could be questions on all sorts of topics. Let's say no holds barred, and a really tremendous opportunity to check the pulse of Australia's relationship with the nation of Israel. Our special guest today, his job is to wrestle with the politics and to deal with the critical developments affecting his homeland and creating strong relations with Australia. While this relationship may be underappreciated by ordinary Australians, the Christian community takes a special interest in our relationship with Israel. And that's because Christians hold a deeper awareness of the plans and purposes of God being outworked through his chosen people. Well, our special guest today has just taken up his appointment. His Excellency, Mr. Amir Maimon, is the ambassador of the State of Israel to Australia. Following an extensive career in the Israeli Defence Force, reaching the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, he joined the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs and has held diplomatic posts in London, in Canada, Turkey, Ethiopia, Washington and Lithuania. Let me make a special welcome to 2020. Your Excellency, Amir, welcome along.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Neil, for having me today in your show. And please call me Amir.
Well, thank you very much, because when you are having a conversation with people who have a high-level diplomatic role, you wonder about titles. So I'll call you Amir, and listeners who call in today, they'll have that sort of freedom as well to call you Amir. Let's call ourselves friends. Amir, let's start with some of your story, because you're a newcomer to this role here in Australia. You've had an extensive military history in your own homeland of Israel, but let's go back a little step further, because your family were Yemenites, and they emigrated from Yemen to Israel. Take us into your family history here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed. My roots are in Yemen, the northern part of Yemen, from the area by the name Haidan, which is not too far from the border with Saudi. And in 1909, in the summer of 1909, my relatives, along with 225 of their friends and neighbors, decided to realize their long dream to move to the land of Israel. They didn't do so because they were suppressed or because they faced some economic challenges. They simply left comfortable life because of their love to Zion. It was not an easy journey, as they had to march, literally to march, over 130 kilometers in the desert in the very hot days of the Yemenite summer. And it took them several days. They were only walking during nighttime when it was a little bit cooler than the daytime. And they reached the port of Madi, where they took a sailing boat, which took them to the port of Aden, where actually they were put in quarantine for 3 months because there were some concerns about their medical condition. And after 3 months, during which they celebrated the Jewish New Year, they finally boarded a German steamboat which brought them to the Promised Land, to the land that they were dreaming to reach. And it was exactly in the midst of the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. Upon their arrival, they were taken from Jaffa Port to a small Jewish settlement by the name Rishon LeZion, where they live for all their life, and where their house is still standing. And this is part of the heritage buildings of the city of Rishon LeZion. A very interesting thing happened upon their landing in the Jaffa Port. We somehow ended with the surname Maimon. This is not our original surname. It was the name of my great-grandfather father's name. And his name was Maimon, the son of Tzadok, and the surname was Gafla. Somehow the Turkish authorities that absorbed the Yemenite Jews that just arrived mixed with the names, and we ended with the Maimon family as our surname.
It's a rich family history, isn't it? And over 100 years ago, when your family made that journey from Yemen to Israel, as you say, they were on foot and then they were on a steamboat. These days, there are a lot of Jewish people and Jewish communities around the world who are making a trip to Israel, and they're getting on board major aeroplanes, and they're arriving in their thousands. We talk about people doing Aliyah, Jewish people returning to their homeland. Do you see your own family history as doing that Aliyah, the arrival back in the homeland? Was there something there in that religious past that was driving your family, do you think, to move back to Israel?
There is no doubt about it that the motivation was religious motivation. For many, many years they were praying in the synagogues in Yemen, and their faces were directed towards the city of Jerusalem. In every single daily prayer, there is the sentence, the phrase, for the next year in Jerusalem. It's all about Jerusalem. It's all about the love, the desire to move and resume the Jewish life in the land that was given to the Jewish people by God.
And we're talking about your family even before the State of Israel was recognized as its own nation. Your father, and you followed in his footsteps into the military, he was able to move through the ranks right up to the level of Major General. He would have been a part of a lot of those conflicts that Israel has been part of over now many, many decades.
Well, he was first and foremost the son of Aaron. Aaron was 11 years old when his father moved from Yemen to Israel, and Aaron worked for 60 years, was working very hard in the winery, a very well-known winery in the city of Rishon LeZion, and he provided his family, and he was the one to bring up his children, his sons, based on the Jewish values, the love of the land of Israel, and the love to others. And then my father joined the army, and his beginning or his start was not a very easy one, as he was not as educated as some others. He had also to support the family when he was a teenager. He had to quit high school. Only during his military service he was able to complete his high school studies as well as university studies. And he didn't start like me as a paratrooper, because his brother Jacob was killed in the War of Independence on January the 9th of 1948. And that's why my father was sent to non-combat units. And this is a different track. The promotion is lower than it is in other units, in other branches. But at a certain point, and after getting his parents' blessing and support, he returned to the combat unit, assumed a different commanding post, and reached the very high ranking of a major general.
Wow. And you entered the Israeli Defense Forces, as you say, as a paratrooper. So did you see through your, I think it was a 12-year career, moving through the ranks up to Lieutenant Colonel, did you see action in those years? Were you part of any of those wars and battles that Israel was fighting?
Yeah. Well, for me it was mainly, I wanted to be like my father. I still very much want to be like him. He is for me a role model. From him, I learned a lot about the love to my nation, to my people, and to my country. Even though when I was little, I didn't get to know him very well, as he was always in the army. He was with his unit, and he came home very rarely. It was very funny. My late mother told me that I used to call my red-haired neighbor as Dad. But then when, and I think that because of his influence, I decided to join the military academy, because I wanted to be like him. It happens that children are following their parents' footsteps. So I joined the military academy and then the paratroopers, special forces. And yes, unfortunately, Israel is still facing some security and defense challenges. And during my military service from 1976 until 1989, I did experience battle, mainly in Lebanon. I participated as a commander in the Litani operation in 1978, and I was a battalion commander in the 1982 Lebanon War.
And these days, here you are in a new appointment now as Israeli ambassador to Australia. I want to invite our listeners to join in our conversation. You might have a question or a comment you'd like to make. You might like to engage with the Israeli ambassador. He is with us live today, and our talkback line is open on 1800 316 316. We're going to continue our conversation in just a few moments and talk about Australia's relationship with the nation of Israel. Our talkback line is open on 1800 316 316. If you have a question or a comment or a way to engage with His Excellency Mr. Amir Maimon, who is the ambassador of the State of Israel to Australia. Amir, let me ask you about the relationship between Australia and Israel. And sometimes we think it's good when one side of politics is in power and not so good when the other. But by and large, the overall relationship, how do you view it?
Well, I think that the relationship are not just good, but they are very good. It is not related to the political party that is leading the country. It was good during the Labour time, and it was good during the Liberal time. The relationship are going back to the First World War, when the Light Horse Battalion, the Australian Light Horse Battalion, liberated the city of Beersheba, a biblical city mentioned in the Old Testament, in the Bible. Abraham was there, and also liberated the other sites in Israel, including Rehovot, which is not too far from my hometown. And it ended in September of 25th of September of 1918, when the Light Horse Battalion liberated the Turkish railway, or occupied the Turkish railway station in the Tzemach Junction. And it continued also during the deliberation in the United Nations on the partition resolution. It was Doug Abbott, the well-known Australian diplomat, former foreign minister, who led the discussion, and Australia was the first country to vote in favor, in support of the establishment of the State of Israel. And relationship can be measured by different forms, by the number of visits, the number of agreements, by the trade, by the people-to-people project. And I think that in each one of the sectors that I just mentioned, I can say, that the relationship are really very good. And we are looking forward to further expand, deepen the relationship nearly in every possible sector.
And as you say, there's a really deep connection for you because you were raised in Beersheba, which is where that charge of the light horse happened, the liberation of Beersheba, which really opened the way for nationhood for the nation of Israel. So you were right, your family was right there in the middle of all of that, no doubt, but your connection to that value and that relationship with Australia, it's a significant one because there are some memorials throughout Israel, but especially I think in Beersheba, the memorial to that charge of the light horse.
Well, there are two major sites in Beersheba. One of them is the cemetery where Australian soldiers and Anzac soldiers are buried, soldiers that sacrifice their life during the charge of the city of Beersheba. And for me, I was passing by the cemetery whenever we were traveling to Tel Aviv to visit our relatives in Rishon LeZion or in other places, because that was the only way to get into Beersheba. And for me to represent the State of Israel years later, not as an ambassador, but as a director in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs during one of the ceremonies was very moving, because for me it was homecoming, return to the city where I was brought up. Years later, the Australian Soldier Park was also established. And just a year ago, when I was trying to coordinate a visit to the park, just before assuming my responsibility as an ambassador, I learned that the director of the park is one of my classmates from the elementary school where I studied in the city of Beersheba. So yes, for me it was a kind of a closure of a circle.
From the Israeli point of view, do ordinary Israelis, when they think of nations as friends and enemies, and there are a lot of enemies that Israel would consider nations to be enemies, when they think of the Australian people, what do they think?
Well, they think about friends. They think about a beautiful continent, not country, because Australia is huge. Israel, just to give the listeners a perspective, is 1/3 of Tasmania. Not even 1/3. Tasmania is about 68,000 square kilometers, and Israel is only about 20,000 square kilometers. I just came back from South Australia, where I visited last week, and I visited the electorate of Mayo, and I learned that only the electorate of Mayo is about 9,000 square kilometers, nearly half the size of the state of Israel. Australia used to be and still very much a very popular destination for young Israelis after their military service, and that's why we managed to reach an agreement with the Australian government to have a working travel visa, so Israelis can travel to Australia and stay here for a year. They can work during their stay here in Australia, and if they will be working for more than 3 weeks, they can even extend their visa for 2 more years.
Our special guest is His Excellency Mr. Amir Maimon. He's the Ambassador of the State of Israel to Australia. Our talkback line is open on 1-800-316-316. Permission to call him by his first name, Amir. Let's take a call from Newitt, who is in Adelaide. Hello, Newitt. Welcome along.
Hello, Neil, and hello, Ambassador Amir. It's such a blessing that I can speak with you and to tell you that how much I love Israel. The special love is something very special. I was unwell for nearly 7 years with fatigue, shut in, but the Bible is open, heaven is open, and I learned everything about God's love and tender love for His people. And as soon as I finished that journey, I feel a little bit of energy. I walked out, and who I met, all the young ex-servicemen, like you just said, they come here to serve, to have a bit of a holiday, working holiday. I met with them. I was friends about 14 of them and sharing the gospel. And this is the delight of my heart. I just want to tell you, we love you. And when I told them, God loves you and I love you because this is what He put in my heart, they cry.
Newitt, wonderful to hear from you. Amir, what are your thoughts for Newitt?
Well, I'm moved. I can't find the words because not every day I hear such loving words from people that I meet with, and I would like really to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the very warm and loving words. And I do hope that you will be able sooner than later realize your wish to visit the land of Israel.
I love to, I love to. And every year at the end of October, when we celebrate the Light Horseman, and I always pray that more people in Australia are aware of the blessing, the hand of blessing of God on our nation for choosing this that nation that was still so unknown, and to be part of that journey with God to deliver the land Israel and the land of Palestine at that time, And I just pray that more people are aware of that.
Thank you so much for your call, Newitt. And our talkback line is open on 1-800-316-316. It's interesting, and we're hearing emotion, aren't we, in Newitt's voice. These thoughts that, my love for the nation of Israel, and a love for the nation of Israel that can come from an engagement with what we read in the Bible. it brings to the surface this spirituality. And I know that your own family history has been deeply religious. And yes, Jewish religion is a little different to what we think of as Christian religion, but there are some wonderful things in common. The fact that we share an Old Testament as part of our holy book scriptures. These are wonderful things that unite Christians and Jews.
Yes, and I would like to mention that yesterday I attended a very moving event here in the Sunshine Coast. I was invited and by Pastor Joel Baker and Ian Warby and Keith and Peter and me and others. And for me, it was the first time ever that I experienced such a very warm gathering of non-Jewish people. Usually when I attend Jewish events with Jewish community, Jewish people, so it's usually a very warm gathering. And to experience the same feeling with non-Jewish people, with Christians who love Israel so much. They were singing Hebrew songs yesterday of Ine Matovu Manaim, and they were singing about Jerusalem, and they were even singing the Israeli national anthem. For me, it was very moving, and I can tell you that it's not every day that people can bring me to tears.
What I'm hearing is that you've received a warm welcome, especially from the Christian community here in Australia. We're about to break for news and continuing our conversation after Vision National News. Our special guest is His Excellency Mr. Amir Maimon. He is the Ambassador of the State of Israel to Australia. Our talkback line open on 1800 316 316. Back with more after news. Wonderful to have you with us on this Thursday edition of 2020. If you are just joining us, joining into a fascinating conversation and an important conversation that gives us an opportunity to check the pulse of Australia's relationship with the nation of Israel. Our special guest, he has a special job to wrestle with the politics and the critical developments that affect his homeland and creating strong relations with us here in Australia. And while this relationship may be underappreciated by ordinary Australians, the Christian community takes a special interest in our relationship with Israel. It's because Christians hold a deeper awareness of the plans and purposes of God being outworked through His chosen people. Well, our special guest today has just taken up his appointment. He is His Excellency Mr. Amir Maimon, pardon me, who's the Ambassador of the State of Israel to Australia. Our talkback line is open on 1800 316 316. Amir, before we get into some controversial issues around Israel and the developments that have been happening just lately, let's take another call. Pete is in Victoria. Hi, Pete. Welcome. We just got to just get Pete connected here. Hello, Pete. Welcome.
G'day, are you there?
Yes, Pete. What are your thoughts for our guest?
G'day to you both. Hi, Amir. But just quickly, in Matthew 23:37, Yeshua said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your chicks together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you are not willing." The Lord said to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. The nation of Israel needs to know that those who believe in the Jewish Messiah, Yeshua, are their greatest allies. In fact, they're only true allies. Shalom to you all.
Pete, a very deep and interesting comment you're making here. Amir, your thoughts for Pete?
Well, no doubts that we all are looking for peace in Jerusalem. We are all looking for a freedom of worship in Jerusalem, a freedom of access. And for us, it is very important, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to reiterate our position, which is very clear about Jerusalem, about the eternal united capital of the State of Israel. That's what Jerusalem is for me. That's what Jerusalem was, and that's what Jerusalem will be forever. And of course, as I said before, we value very much our Christian friends.
Pete, thank you so much for your call. 1-800-316-316 to join in our conversation. Before we move on from there, praying for the peace of Jerusalem, having an ancient document as we have, the First Testament, the Second Testament, the Old, the New Testament, as we call things in different ways. There's something powerful about the things that were written in antiquity that unite peoples together when they're going through challenges for now and into the future. The fact of those things written in the Bible, does it ever amaze you, surprise you that we can be united because of things that were written thousands of years ago?
No, I'm not surprised. I believe that we should learn a lot from the past and look for ways to realize it in the present and the future. I believe that the focus of our attention should be given to the present and the future. And again, for me, Jerusalem, and by the way, Jerusalem was never a capital of any other nation than the Jewish people. And the state of Israel, in different occasions, was very clear about the vision, her vision of the city of Jerusalem, an open city, a city that all dominion can worship, can visit, and in a very peaceful and secure atmosphere.
And of course, having Jerusalem as the capital, that's something, as you say, has an eternal capital about it and a biblical foundation, and God making this a center, and this thought of praying for the peace of Jerusalem. That's something that unites the Jewish people around their nationhood, is this fact of Jerusalem not divided.
Absolutely. And that's why from, the day of the inception of the State of Israel, there were no doubts and there were no question where our capital is going to be. And that's why our capital is in Jerusalem. The House of Representatives, the Knesset, is in Jerusalem. All government officials, all government ministries are based in Jerusalem. And I do hope that more and more countries will also set their embassies in the capital of the State of Israel, Jerusalem.
It has been a very contentious thing. And then you had the US opened an embassy in Jerusalem. It was a very contentious thing around the world. I think Australia was moving that direction. That hasn't happened yet. Perhaps that will happen sometime into the future. The thought that there is...
it's important to remind the listeners that Australia did open an office in Jerusalem. It's a trade and defense office situated in Jerusalem.
All right. We'll count that as a first step. Is that the way you'd see that?
Absolutely. A very positive first step.
Before we take another call, there are so many controversies to talk about. There are a lot of threats that are coming against Israel. One of those, and the most perhaps prominent that the world would be looking at, is not necessarily, and it is very important, of course, the tensions between the Palestinian people and the Jewish people, but the growing threat now with the Iranian nuclear program. I wonder if you've got an impression about what difference that Iranian nuclear program makes to the people of Israel and how the world ought to be looking at that.
Well, I first and foremost, I wouldn't, with your permission, Neil, define it as controversial, but as a challenge. This is very challenging for the State of Israel, but not just for the State of Israel, but also to the entire international community, the one who believes in democracy, in freedom, and in security. To start with, when we are talking about the Iranian quest to acquire nuclear weapon capability, so I can tell you that they are very close. They are very close because they already mastered the technology, and the nuclear technology is based on three major pillars: conversion, enrichment, and reprocessing. The Iranians already, and this is not part of the so-called Israeli propaganda, simply read the IAEA report. It's a United Nations agency which is responsible for International Atomic Energy Agency. and they are the one to follow the nuclear developments in Iran. In their Director General, Ambassador Grossi, recent report, he highlighted or listed the risks that are arising from the Iranians' nuclear weapon program. He was also talking about the timetable. So for us, it's not a theoretical threat. And by the way, in the textbooks, you measure a threat is defined by a combination of intention and capabilities. And if you'll Google, you will see it that nearly every Iranian leader has stated or is stating about the intention to wipe out the state of Israel from the map. In some of their ballistic missiles, you can see inscription of the destruction of Israel and the USA. And the other part is, of course, related to capabilities. And now that they already have the delivery means, namely the ballistic missiles plus the nuclear weapon capabilities, so for us it's a real threat. It's not something theoretical. But when talking about Iran, it's also very important to remember that Iran is not just about the nuclear weapon program. Iran is also about their support of terrorism. Iran is also about their efforts to undermine some of the moderate Arab states in the region, such as United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. Only in the beginning of this year, they used one of their proxies in Yemen, the Houthis, to launch ballistic missiles, UAVs, and this is part of their scheme to undermine the moderate Arab states. Let's not forget that for them it's all about the enhancement of their regional hegemony, and they're doing so by using some of their proxies. They have the Hezbollah in Lebanon, they have the Hamas in the Gaza Strip, they have the Houthis in Yemen, and they also have some other fractions in Syria, in Iraq, and in other places.
There are, as you describe, threats coming from every direction. And let me just take you into some deeper waters here. The thought that the Israeli military is not afraid to defend itself. We'll often hear stories of some preemptive strikes or retaliations that come from rockets that have been launched across borders, Syria. The fear that the world holds is that there'll be a preemptive strike on Iran, as they may be planning a strike on Israel, and the flashpoint that could eventuate the potential for nuclear war. Is that something that is constantly on the agenda for discussion at high levels in Israel?
Well, for me, it's very important to emphasize that we are looking for a peaceful solution. It's not that the state of Israel is against, an agreement with Iran, an agreement that will roll back their nuclear weapon program, an agreement that will take out the enriched uranium that was accumulated so far. We are not against. We are against a bad agreement. And the alternative to a bad agreement is not a military option. The alternative is a good agreement. And of course, it's very important to maintain all options on the table. All options are on the table, including the military options. Because as I said before, we're talking about a threat. We're not talking about a theoretical threat. We're talking about a nation that is looking to, not nation, we're talking about leadership, because we don't have any differences with the Iranian people. We used to have very good and close relationship until the end of the 70s. And it is the new leadership, it is the Ayatollahs that are looking for the destruction of the state of Israel. And this is the duty of every democratic government to take all necessary measures in order to defend its citizens. And Israel is not different than Australia, United States of America, or the United Kingdom. And if the Iranians will possess a clear threat, an immediate threat, we will have the means to eliminate and to respond.
And all the more powerful the biblical challenge, the call to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. 1-800-316-316. Let's take another call. Mike is in Tasmania. Hello, Mike.
Good morning. My wife's grandmother was a Gentile, was born in Tel Aviv when her mother was in the Polish Navy after her mother escaped from a Soviet gulag in West Kazakhstan. And so I think it's handy to be born in Israel, as it is Australia, and we love Israel and we're very grateful.
Mike, thank you for those comments. Amir, your thoughts for Mike?
Well, I just had the privilege and the pleasure of visiting Tasmania, Hobart. I stayed there for 2 days, and I was so moved when I visited the oldest Jewish synagogue, which is situated in Hobart. The construction started in 1843, and the first service was held in 1845. So thank you for your words, and I'm looking forward for my next trip to Tasmania.
Mike, thank you so much for your call. 1-800-316-316. Our special guest is the ambassador from Israel to Australia, Amir. Let me just ask you, Amir, let's touch on some of these controversial issues. There is a propaganda war that goes on. For those that support the Jewish state, and there's another side, those who support the Palestinians. Oftentimes it's over disputed territory, and the United Nations rarely ever seems to be on the side of Israel, and usually on the side of a Palestinian people. The ongoing disputes, they are challenging, aren't they? And it can't be any easier because of a parliament, the Knesset, in some level of disarray and looking forward to elections later this year. How do you describe the ongoing challenges and tensions that are happening in Israel between the Jewish people and the Palestinians?
Well, to start with, the recent round of escalation was with the Hamas, who, since the Israeli government unilaterally withdrew from the Gaza Strip in 2006, do not miss the opportunity to disturb the Israelis who are living along the border and elsewhere by firing different type of missiles, short range, the Qassam type, or the medium range, the Fajr, the Katyusha, and they also have the long range. As I said before, the Hamas is an Iranian proxy, and you probably remember that early this year, the Hamas was listed here and recognized here in Australia as a terror organization. So we are talking about terrorists. We are talking about terrorists that are looking to harm Israel, are looking to kill innocent Israelis. And this is something that should not be forgotten. At the same time, Israel is still committed, and it was stated very clearly by Prime Minister Lapid during Biden visit. Israel is committed to the vision of two-state solution. Unfortunately, since the signing of the Declaration of Principle in 1993, even though some progress was made, we still didn't reach the time, and the conditions are not the right condition to start talking about the permanent status of the territories. It was agreed that there will be two major phases, the interim phase and the permanent phase. And unfortunately, as it is also in Tango, it requires two parties. We are still unable to sit around the table with our Palestinian partners and to talk about the remaining hardcore issues that are still in dispute. And there are hard-core issues that are in dispute between the two parties, such as the question of Jerusalem, such as the question of the Israeli settlements, the Palestinian demand for the right of return. And by the way, they're not asking to return to their future Palestinian state. They're asking to return to Jaffa, Tel Aviv, and Haifa, to the places prior to the 1947 war. So there are still many issues that need to be resolved. Hopefully, we will be able to do it sooner than later. But for the time being, we are not there.
So what I can hear you say is that even if there was some small resolution around the Palestinian issues, it would then continue to escalate. There would be more and more that would be called on. 1-800-316-316. Let's take another call. Michael is in Tasmania. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how you doing?
Very good, Michael. Need to be quick. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I'm Jewish. I'm a Cohen. I'm also a born-again Christian. I'd like Jewish people to go more menschkeit. The humbleness seems to transcend into a little bit of arrogance. God bless Israel. Keep it safe. Everything is preordained. It's going to happen. History repeats itself. It's written in the Old Testament. Unfortunately, the attitude is what Jewish people want, Jewish people get. I'd like a little bit more assimilation, a little bit more integration, to walk with people, not just superficial on the outside, to embrace all people. Lebanese, Palestinian. I'm a chef. I do it through food. Somehow, I'm not an expert on politics or military strategies. But
Michael, in an ideal world, you might get all of those uniting together under a big common banner of love. It doesn't seem to be the reality for the nation of Israel, where there are tensions everywhere. Amir, your thoughts for Michael?
Well, I think that in principle he's absolutely right. He's not absolutely right about the characterization of the Jewish people, but that's what the state of Israel is looking for. We're looking to expand our relationship with every country in the world, and that's why the breakthrough with some moderate Arab countries such as the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco are of great importance, and these are not just an agreement between leaders, but between people. That's what I'm trying to do here, to reach out to other communities than the Jewish community. That's why I'm here in Queensland, in Brisbane. That's why I'm speaking in this program. And for me, it was so moving, not just to be able to embrace, to hug people, but also to be hugged and to be embraced by the Christian community. And I'm planning to expand the relationship and my at least outreach attempts to every other community here in Australia.
Michael, thank you so much for your call, and time is running short. I wonder whether we might finish our conversation around some of the issues, what are called the Abraham Accords. This started under the presidency of Donald Trump, and no doubt the ball is rolling, and no matter what would change, there'll still no doubt be new relationships and normality of relationship between nations. Is this something you expect to continue to go forward? Nations that are relating with Israel in a very positive way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that there are two important elements in the recent Abraham Accords that were signed. One of them is the understanding that nations should not link the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to the development of their bilateral relationship with Israel. The understanding that Israel is not just about the conflict, that Israel is about innovation, that Israel is about technology. And, it was for me very refreshing to hear during the last 6 months there's so many positive reports in the Australian media about the Israeli experience with the COVID, about the Israeli innovation. Israel was defined in quite a number of articles and radio programs as a technological superpower. And I think that also the surrounding countries, also the countries that for many years refrained from establishing diplomatic relationship with Israel, understand that they can gain a lot from having friendly relationship, business relationship, technological relationship with the State of Israel. What I like about the recent agreements that were signed with the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, and Bahrain is that it's not just an agreement between leaders. It's not just a piece of paper. The warmth of the relationship can be seen, can be felt. The people from the Emirate and Bahrain are visiting Israel and vice versa. And we are really looking forward to expand the relationship to some other countries that at the moment we do not have and enjoy a friendly and diplomatic relationship.
We are reminded, aren't we, in a conversation like this, that while there are positives, there are glimmers of light, there are good relationships being formed, that there are so many threats also against the nation of Israel. A wonderful opportunity today to capture your insights, even your heartbeat today for the relationship between Israel and Australia. His Excellency Mr. Amir Maimon is the ambassador of the State of Israel to Australia. Wonderful insight today. We will have this conversation on a podcast a little later on this afternoon. Mr. Ambassador, Your Excellency, Amir, thank you so much for taking some time to share your thoughts and your heart with our listeners today on 2020.
Thank you, Neil, for having me, and thank you for the listeners for listening to what we had to say today.
And it would be very fitting for us to go to a song which has a Jewish feel about it. This one is from Joshua Aaron, David Danced.